and we're going to do just a quick slide or two off the top with some housekeeping items and some background on who we are before turning things over to Donna Bradbury and our partners at the state. So thanks again for joining us. So today, just really quickly, in terms of the housekeeping front, so many of you are familiar with the WebEx functionality, but just in case and as a reminder, we will be having Q&A at the end of the presentation. So we just ask that if you are chatting in your questions, which you can do by clicking on the chat bubble on the top right-hand side of your screen, there's a drop-down where you can send to, and we just ask that you select to send to all panelists, which there's quite a few of us today if you're looking at your sidebar, spread out throughout in different geographical locations. So it's really helpful for us as questions come through for all of the panels to be able to see. So we really do appreciate that. Also, as a quick reminder, slides from today are posted at mctac.org under past events, and a recording will be added to that same event page in the next couple of days. It just takes a little bit of time for the recording to download. And then questions that aren't addressed today, we have quite a few people registered and anticipate quite a few questions. Questions that aren't addressed today will be revisited during subsequent presentations. We'll go over the fact that this is part one of a three-part series a little more later in the presentation. And then just as a reminder, information and timelines are current as of the date of the presentation, which is today, Wednesday, January 27th. And this is just to keep in mind that things can change in terms of the transition and transformation efforts, as well as since this will be recorded and put online, if someone's watching or listening to this a year from now, not all the information may be particularly up to date. But so with those caveats, I just wanted to turn things over to my good colleague Yvette, just to say a few words about CTAC and MCTAC and the kids training and technical assistance efforts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dan. So, so my name is Yvette Kelly, and with the Community Technical Assistance Center. And for those of you who are not familiar with what we have done in the past, we have been around since 2011, and we started off as the Children's Technical Assistance Center, and then expanded in 2012 to offer technical assistance to Article 31 clinics. And since that time, we have expanded to provide both technical assistance for our managed care transition, and then called ourselves the Community Technical Assistance Center. And so as things in New York State transform and change, we're going to be doing a series of offerings to assist providers in the transformation process and readying themselves for that to happen over the next, we're going to start in the next month, and we're going to continue for another year or so.
Great. Thanks so much, Yvette. So with that, we'll advance the slides up to our humble title slide for the day, Transforming the Children's Medicaid System. We have 968 people registered to hear about today. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Donna Bradbury, Associate Commissioner for the Division of Integrated Community Services for Children and Families at the Office of Mental Health of New York State. Donna, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan, and thank you, Yvette. And I do want to thank everybody at the Community Technical Assistance Center and the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center, affectionately known as CTAC and MCTAC. You guys are really terrific, and thanks so much for hosting this webinar today. So before I get started, I do want to say that I'm presenting these slides really on behalf of the cross-agency team that's been working on this design. So that includes the Department of Health, the Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, and the Office of Children and Family Services, in addition to the Office of Mental Health. So I'm really just being the sole presenter today, just really for ease, rather than kind of doing our usual, which is sharing presentations. So for a short presentation like this, it's just a little bit easier for one person to do that presentation. But this work that you're going to be hearing about today reflects an awful lot of hard work on the part of a lot of people that work for those 4 state agencies. So thank you to all of you who are listening today and who are here with me today. So can we not advance slides? So we might have a technical difficulty here, so we're just trying to advance the slide. Can we see if we're...
Hey, Donna, I advanced to the agenda slide from my end, so if the advancing isn't working on your end, we can just do it from here, no problem.
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to because we can't seem to get it to work.
All right, no worries.
Thanks. Thanks, Dan. Sorry, everybody. None of these things ever go very smoothly, so sorry about that. Technology. Okay, so it looks like we're going, okay, good. So we can see the agenda slide, and hopefully all the participants can see the agenda slide. If you can't, then write a comment in the chat box, please. So welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to do an overview of the Children's Medicaid redesign. We're going to talk about how that design is going to be phased in, and then we'll have some Q&A. So the triple aim. So we put this slide in here really to remind everybody that New York State's Medicaid redesign efforts are not occurring in a vacuum. They're occurring within the context of the national movement toward healthcare reform that includes a lot of massive changes. The triple aim is a framework developed by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement that describes an approach to optimizing healthcare system performance. So what does that mean? It means improving patient experience of care. It means improving health by addressing the root causes of poor health, so really looking at population-level health. And finally, reducing Medicaid costs. I do like to note when we're doing this presentation that we ought not to worry too much in the children's world about that aspect of reducing costs. It's not exactly the same experience as you hear about in the adult managed care transition, where savings are expected to occur rather quickly. In the children's world, those savings are expected to accrue slowly over time. And that's really going to be due to our implementation of preventive services that we all agree are the right way to go with kids. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So a little bit about the overall goals of the transition to managed care that New York State is making. Again, looking to control costs, but most importantly, looking to improve quality, improve population health, and increase preventive services. So really exactly in line with the national movement towards the triple aim. So there's a lot of words on this slide, and I'm not going to read them all to you. But really, this is here to point out that this planning and designing is occurring in the context of various principles that we collectively across the 4 state agencies believe to be true and worthy principles. Way back when, about 4 years ago, when the Children's Medicaid Redesign team first started its work, which was then published in the Medicaid Redesign workbook, there were guiding principles that those individuals created that then gave birth to these more detailed principles that the state team has been working on. Things like person-centered care management, integrated physical and behavioral health care, recovery or resiliency-oriented services, consumer choice, protection of continuity of care, ensuring adequate and comprehensive networks, tying payment to outcomes, and reinvesting savings to improve services for behavioral health populations. And finally, and last but certainly not least, addressing the unique needs of children, families, and older adults. So our goal with all of this work is to get Medicaid-enrolled children back on their developmental track. And we hope to do that by identifying their needs sooner. We want to maintain kids at home with appropriate supports and services, maintaining children in their home community in the least restrictive setting, and preventing the need for longer-term, higher-end, higher-cost services. So again, the focus on building resiliency for children and their families. So here we're going to get into a little bit of the meat of the design. So we're going to talk a little bit about the key features. And I do want to note that this design process is not at all finished. We're still very actively working on it. And so, we'll keep updating you, of course, as we go along. But as of now, the phases that we're talking about include expanding access to care management for children who meet health home criteria, and that's scheduled to begin in September of this calendar year. Creating 6 new state plan services scheduled to begin in 2017. Transitioning children's behavioral health care benefits from a fee-for-service environment to a managed care environment scheduled for 2017. Providing easier access to an aligned array of home and community-based services, again, beginning in 2017. Shifting the voluntary foster care per diem population to managed care, 2017. And as we transition, always looking to ensure the continuity of care for kids who are already receiving behavioral health services. So this is a nice, succinct visual that shows where we are now and where we plan to be in the future. So as of now, there are some services already in Medicaid managed care, of course, physical health services, dental services, and some behavioral health services, such as outpatient clinic and inpatient. We have an array of state plan services in the fee-for-service world. We have a limited array of home and community-based services, depending on which waiver program you're talking about, and those services are available only to waiver-eligible children. So OMH has a 1915C waiver, OCFS has the Bridges to Health waiver, and DOH has the Care at Home waiver. So that's what we're referring to there. And then we offer care coordination under those waivers, and we also have a targeted care management program here at OMH. In the future, what we're looking at is the current behavioral health state plan services moving into managed care. We're looking at health home care coordination available to an expanded population of children. We're looking at the foster care population transitioning to Medicaid managed care, the 6 new state plan services, and an expanded array of home and community-based services. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some existing Medicaid services that are already in managed care, physical health and dental care, mental health and substance abuse outpatient clinic, and inpatient health, as well as behavioral health care. Here is the list of Medicaid services that are planned to transition to managed care in 2017. So I won't read those to you, I'll spare you that. And then we're noting the children that are impacted by the Medicaid redesign. So those would be youth diagnosed with substance abuse disorders, youth diagnosed with serious emotional disturbance, mental health disorders, children and youth placed in foster care or who have experienced abuse, neglect, and maltreatment, and medically fragile children who have complex conditions that require significant medical support. We do want to note also that there are some populations of children who are excluded from Medicaid managed care. So some examples, kids with third-party health insurance, kids who are dually insured. There's not a lot of those, but there's a few, Medicaid, Medicare kids. Individuals who become eligible for Medicaid only after spending down a portion of their income. Youth in the juvenile justice system. Enrollees of Child Health Plus. And then we do want to note also that eligible individuals served by OPWDD are excluded, and there's a separate Medicaid redesign going on for those kids. So a word about health homes. So we expect in September of this year, health home enrollment will begin for those children who are eligible. 16 health homes have been contingently designated across the state, and they're preparing for implementation. If you haven't already done so, we strongly advise TCM providers and those providers who provide care management under the existing waivers to begin working with their local health homes to become health home care managers. The OMH Targeted Case Management Program will transition to health home in 2016. And those children who are receiving home and community-based services through our waivers, they'll be enrolled in health homes at a later date. We expect that to be 2017. And I encourage you to go to the Department of Health website for more information on that. So here is a list of the 6 new state plan services that we expect to be available in early 2017. We do want to note, of course, that we can't do this in a vacuum, that we need the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to approve our state plan amendment. We're optimistic about that. Preliminary conversations have gone very well. And the eligibility for these services is for those kids who are Medicaid enrolled and who meet medical necessity criteria. So the idea behind these services is to actively prevent as many problems as we can, again, to intervene earlier. We know that as of now in the current environment, we miss a lot of opportunities in a child's developmental trajectory that could prevent a costly path for the child and the family. In the current environment, a child, together with their family, in many cases, has to fail through a variety of programs, services, and initiatives before being determined eligible, for example, for a home and community-based waiver. And by that time, a lot of damage has been done. The Children's Design team thought about several aspects of our current systems and the populations we serve, including overlaps and needs across systems for children and families, and continued gaps in services. The shortcomings of our current systems, combined with the desire to intervene earlier, led to a decision to develop this new set of state plan services. It will enable us to focus upon prevention and wellness and a better integration of behavioral health-focused services into children's early care. So these proposed services will be listed in the state plan under the Early Periodic Screening, Diagnosis, and Treatment Benefits, commonly known as EPSDT. And they'll be available for kids, as I said, enrolled in Medicaid under the age of 21. And these services will be available to be delivered in the community, not required to be delivered in an office setting. So here we see the aligned home and community-based services that I referred to earlier. What we did was we took the services that are currently offered in the OMH, the OCFS, and the DOH waivers, and we've aligned them so that children can access those services regardless of the door that they entered through. Again, I do want to note that implementation of this service array does require CMS approval. The existing 1915C waiver programs will essentially be discontinued at the time of this transition, when the transition is completed. And this expanded eligibility for home and community-based services will be phased in starting in 2017. And these services will be managed in the Medicaid managed care system as well as fee-for-service, because as I noted earlier, there will be some children who are excluded from managed care. So the goal here has become really our mantra, and that is that children and their families will receive the right services at the right time and the right amount. Some of you will remember that this harkens back to one of the principles of the Children's Plan back from a long time ago, 2008, but still very much holds true now. So we know that that early identification and early intervention can minimize the long-term disabilities of mental disorders, and that mental illnesses in children and adolescents are very real and can be treated effectively, especially when identified and treated early. So this is what we hope to achieve in implementing this design.
Okay, thank you, Donna. I just want to remind people that if you, when you registered for this, you realize that this was part one of a three-part series, and so I just want to remind you to register for parts 2 and 3. In part 2, we will be covering who's included, who's in, and who's out for the Children's State Plan Amendment and home and community-based services. And for part 3, we will be focusing on building capacity, preparing for changes ahead, which really identifies areas of focus for providers and outlining TA offerings that are going to be upcoming. And along with some lessons that we've learned along the way. So again, just a reminder, if you have not done so already, to please sign up for part 2 and part 3. And also that if you are unable to attend any of the presentations live, that they will be posted on the website. So check back for them.
And then we're pleased to, I guess, tentatively announce that we'll be offering, similar to what was done on the adult side of things, an in-depth walkthrough of in-person events, kind of restarting the transformation, technical assistance, and training efforts for providers statewide, while the implementation timeline staggers New York City, Long Island with the rest of state. Doing this in one batch so folks all have the same information at the same time is a major priority, both of the states and of the Technical Assistance Center. So we're happy to share this preliminary schedule. We're in the process of finalizing spaces, and these are really state kids team leadership members doing pretty robust in-depth presentations and walkthrough of the transformation efforts. And also we'll be able at that time to share some of the training and technical assistance calendar and plans and schedule for the coming year as well, so folks can plan accordingly for what staff they might want to be sending to things, you know, over the spring, summer, and even into the fall as we gear up for January 1, 2017. But so just a quick run through, we'll be starting in Long Island, offering a New York City training. We're still going back and forth as to whether we're doing one large session in the morning or AM and PM offerings, so more to come on that front. We'll be making our way up into the Hudson and up to Albany, and then doing a Western and Central New York state cross-state tour We don't have a tour bus by any means, but we will be going from Buffalo to the Finger Lakes to Syracuse in succession. And then a quick spoiler alert, we're also trying on the adult side of things, as I know there are providers on the line who do both adult and kids services. We're trying to coordinate some offerings within those days in those areas as well. So keep an eye out on that front as well for the rest of state adult transition. And just to mention, so in addition to these kind of kickoff events, if you will, technical assistance throughout the year and beyond January 1st, 2017 will be offered for the state plan amendment services that Donna overviewed, kids, HCBS, and the managed care transition. And these are phased in two pieces. There's high-level topic introductions, which is a little more conceptual and will look very similar to what we did on the adult side. Utilization management will have some nuance between adults and kids, but much of it is conceptually very much the same. Same with revenue cycle management. And then we'll be moving forward with more in-depth implementation guidance when that information from both the state and plans becomes available. And we're always very happy to be working with them on those fronts to help provide that information to the provider community. And then before we turn things over to Q&A, just really quickly, so many of you have been a part of our presentations and have been with MCTAC this isn't your first time to the rodeo or the disco, but so just wanted to mention to folks and remind them or possibly tell you for the first time, so there's a pretty robust and growing list of tools and resources on the adult side. As New York City has already transitioned to managed care, HCBS is already live in New York City, and that's following rest of state in the coming months. But so between a glossary and top acronyms, a managed care language guide, a plan matrix, a new FAQ tool will be launching, interactive billing and tools that are coming down the pipeline. All of those tools will be updated not just to incorporate adult rest of state, but to make sure that they're kids specific. So we want to really prioritize that, while a lot of folks are adult and kids, for folks who are kids only, that these tools really reflect your needs around what's coming down the pipe. And then also we want to make sure that our tools and information is tailored for the very unique and different types of kids providers that are out there. Donna spoke at length about the different groups and populations and service providers who will be transitioning into managed care and impacted by SPA and HCBS. So making sure that not just our presentations and trainings reflect that, but also the tools is a major priority for us. Also, we'd just like to remind people that the state website is a really great resource as well. And we'd really encourage folks as the transformation efforts move forward just to continue to check back, not just with MCTAC, but on the state pages to be sure that you're up to date on what's going on. And with that, we'd like to open things up to questions. We've been collecting things that have been coming through over the past half hour or so in the background. So we just encourage people to chat in your questions. Because of the number of people on the line, we won't be opening it up for questions, but we do plan with the in-person events that are coming in March and April to have quite a bit of in-person opportunity for dialogue. So with that, if you just continue to chat in your questions as we're going, and we'll get started with Q&A in just a second. I'd also just like to mention that I think we've broken the record for most panelists on a webinar today, which is really exciting. I know we have representatives, in addition to Donna, we have representatives from the other state agencies on the line as well. So just wanted to give a quick acknowledgement and encourage folks wherever you're interested and able to chime in to give some of the context and nuance on the questions we'll be going through. So off the top, so there's a question about HCBS. And is there currently a framework of exactly what the HCBS services will look like for kids? And are there preliminary designated providers of these services?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Angela Keller from the Office of Mental Health. I will take that question. The HCBS services that will be offered for children really have been developed from the foundation of the existing 1915C waivers. Where some of those services may have been similar, we have aligned them. So, for example, if there were some slight differences between one of the OCFS services and OMH services. We're really trying to collapse that into one service definition, qualification of the staff that can deliver that, et cetera. So we will be releasing an HCBS provider manual at some point this year that certainly will detail what those services are and who can provide them. We released a draft benefit package probably in the fall of 2014 that detailed those services as well.
Great, thanks. So looking through, we had a couple of questions about different populations and I guess their inclusion or not inclusion and how they fit into the current transformation efforts. And so I just wanted to remind folks, so these we broke this into 3 parts, so these are kind of just shorter chunks. So today is a little higher level, and in part 2 we'll be going a little more in depth in who's carved in and carved out. But we'll take a couple of these off the top. So a couple of the questions that have come in are on the juvenile justice youth rule out, and just a little bit more context in that, as well as the CSE population, and then as well as, there's one other. Oh, how this fits in with RTFs and 18 to 21-year-olds. So if we can cover those 3 in a single question and answer, I think we'll be in great shape.
Hi, this is Amy Weber from OCFS. For clarification, youth that are placed in OCFS-operated juvenile justice facilities will not be enrolled in managed care. I'm going to turn it over to Angela for the other populations. I'm not sure that I saw them.
So what services will continue to be available, Mimi, for the criminal justice involved youth if they're not able to enroll in managed care and access the HCBS services? That's what I'm gathering that question today.
Thank you for that interpretation. I don't know that I picked up on that. So, you know, part of as Donna alluded to earlier, we're still working through many of the design elements of this whole transformation. We certainly recognize that there are kids who will come in and out of Medicaid, and by virtue of that will come in and out of managed care plans. And so as we're thinking of building the system, we certainly understand that we will be building rates for the HCBS services that will be available on a fee-for-service basis. So by virtue of youth placed at OCFS-operated juvenile justice facilities, they won't be denied access to any Medicaid service. It will be important for all of us to note that an OCFS-operated juvenile justice facility would not be considered a home and community-based setting as we look back to the March 14, 2014 St. Patty Day rules. So that population of kids would not have access to those services regardless.
Dan, could you point us to the additional questions that you were asking us to answer, the 3 you were referencing?
Sure. So somebody asked, was interested in how the CSE population fits in, and then also a question about RTFs. Once the child redesign goes live and RTFs are impacted by Medicaid redesign, will individuals between 18 and 21 be able to be referred to RTFs?
So this is Nini from OCFS, and I think as we think about the CSE population, we probably need to think about it in 2 blocks. We have children who are receiving Committee on Special Education Services that are placed in, remain in their home. I don't think we think of those children and youth as any different than any other Medicaid recipient. We certainly recognize that there are a group of children that are attending and living at 853 schools. And so I think we need to spend more time thinking about the implications of this transformation as it relates to that small number of children and youth.
And in regard to RTF, so RTFs as a service will transition to Medicaid managed care. If children between the ages of 18 and 21, if they're new to if they're not already in the RTS, it's unlikely that that would be the service of choice for these kids. We're going to look more closely at the transition age population and do more planning for those youth to make sure they're getting the service that's most appropriate for them. But if children are already in an RTF setting at that age, then they'll continue to be eligible for that service. So I think more to come as we as the children's services transition into managed care, and we understand better how to most appropriately serve the transition age population.
Great, thanks, Donna. So we're gonna have a little rapid fire HCBS round. So here we go. So somebody was interested in where they can find the draft HCBS provider manual, when and what the designation process for HCBS will be, and then a question about startup funding on the adult side, and if state share funding will be available for SPA and kids HIT readiness.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the provider designation process for both the new SPA services and the children's HCBS services. For the SPA services, those decisions have not been completely fleshed out as of date. We hope in the very near future to be able to lay out the process for how providers will be designated to become SPA providers. The HCBS provider designation, however, will follow very closely to the adult designation, where once we release the provider manual that defines the qualifications, the training, what the services are, there will be an application form that will be filed electronically with the state agencies and reviewed, and then a certain number of providers would be designated. One thing of note that is different from the adult design is that in the children's service system, because we already have existing 1915C waivers and therefore already have HCBS providers, the existing children's HCBS providers will be grandfathered in to provide whatever services they currently provide in the C waivers. So, for example, if an HCBS provider is a provider of skill building and planned respite in the B2H waiver, they would be grandfathered in to provide planned respite and skill building under the HCBS of this managed care design. And the provider manuals for both the SPA and HCBS services, again, will be coming out some point relatively soon, we would expect.
And a question came in about, again, about HCBS and comparing to the adult system. So getting a client into adult home and community-based services is a multi-step process. And if you can just address directly, do you anticipate it being a similar system for children? And I think that's referring to the workflow on the adult side.
There are some differences in how children will become HCBS eligible, and some of the workflow is slightly different. We will be getting into that detail in probably a future webinar, not one of these three of this series. One difference between the adult and children's design is that on the adult side, they're using the community mental health module, the Inner Eye, and on the children's side, it will be the CANS New York, or the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths version for New York assessment tool. So the algorithms that are associated with HCBS eligibility for adults and children are really based on completely different tools and gather similar but different information.
I see there's a question about children's day treatment. We've been actively working on a redesign for the children's day treatment. We had a provider work group that had been running for a while. We will reconvene that work group. We are looking to assist day treatment providers in the long run in implementing the 6 new state plan services and enabling them to push those services into various educational settings. So there'll be more to come on that redesign, but we're very optimistic about actually being able to serve children much more efficiently using those services. So you'll be hearing me talk more about that later this year.
Great, thanks for chiming in on that one. So just as we're looking through the questions that are coming through, a question came through about someone who's applied for HCBS services, and I'm assuming that means designation to provide HCBS services. And so there's on the OMH website, they've just actually relaunched the HCBS pages for the adult side, both with the New York City and rest of state designation information, which is great. And there's also, I believe, contact information if you have questions about the status of your HCBS designation, or if you'd like to change your designation or your plans to provide services. So we suggest people check that out. If you don't know the links, you can either look for them on the OMH site, but we also have them on the mixtac.org site under Tools and Resources under the HCBS category. So just wanted to throw that out there. Another question about the grandfathering that I believe Angela was talking about. So when you say that all existing providers will be grandfathered in to provide services in managed care as they do currently under 1915C waivers, do you mean individual providers or the approved overall agencies?
Okay, I want to address a couple things in that question. So if you're an existing 1915C provider of any of the HCBS services, you will be grandfathered in. We will have a process to inform you what services you've been grandfathered in. You will, the agency will either accept that designation or tell us that you have no interest in continuing to provide that service once the transition to managed care occurs. But the thing to also keep in mind is designation. Once we have designated all the HCBS providers, and that will be a continuing process as we, once we open that process, that list of designated providers will be given to the managed care plans, and then those providers can expect to begin some communication with the plans and to engage in contract discussions. So you'll be grandfathered in to provide services once you have a contract with managed care. How the services are delivered currently under the 1915C waivers. Keep in mind, Donna said earlier that the 1915C programs in their current format will be discontinued. So we will go from HCBS programs to HCBS services, and it'll be an array that is available to the children who are eligible. So there is not an exact one-to-one how you've been delivering it, how you've been used to the maybe eligibility process is not going to be exactly the same because the service delivery system will be changing.
And Angela, this is Mimi, if I could just add to that. So right on the heels of grandfathering existing 1915C waiver service providers into the transformed system, we certainly acknowledge that there's we need additional providers of HCBS services to come on board. So there'll be a somewhat different process to get new providers on board.
Great. And Mimi, I think we're going to direct this question to you as well regarding foster care children. So will services for mental health be billed to the managed care program, or will we, as the provider, continue to bill the foster care agency directly?
So I'm not sure who the "we" is in that question, but certainly it is the hope of New York State that as many services as possible will be billed to the managed care plan.
Great. And a question about third-party insurance. Someone was just curious if there have been discussions or thought into having these services, again, making no assumptions what these services are, be open to kids with third-party insurance, and how does third-party insurance change what they are or aren't eligible for?
So this is Donna. So we are hopeful that at least 2 of the 6 new state plan services will be eligible under the parity legislation to be covered by commercial insurance. I think more to come on that. We have to do, some work on our end to ensure that that happens, but we are very mindful of that population.
Great, thanks. And I think we've been doing an okay job of this during the webinar, considering the number of panelists, but a request came in, and that I'll echo, that when we're all responding and speaking, if we just identify ourselves so folks know who all is on the line. So this is Dan, and I'm reading the questions as we go. But so another question that came through that I'll take a quick stab at because we've kind of covered it already is how will providers be designated to provide the 6 SPA services? So the designation process for SPA is still being finalized, and we hope to have more information about that in partnership with the state in the coming weeks and months. And a couple of other questions that came through that we can take and give our state partners a quick break, take a drink of water or whatever you might need. So a couple of things was looking at just if we can talk a little bit about the training and what's being offered on-site versus online. So again, I'd compare our plans, our tentative preliminary plans for technical assistance and training for the coming year and beyond for the kids system to reflect and mirror what was done on the adult side, of course, with some nuance and some specificity to the specific needs and challenges that the kids system might face. That said, in terms of what's in person and what's done online, a lot of the high-level stuff is oftentimes done in person. It's a great chance to have discussion around the different topics, and then for some of and as well on the implementation side for things like billing and UM. And then we recognize, and I hope folks can appreciate with this webinar series, for example, that we're keeping the presentations to an hour long, including Q&A. Just as we've gotten feedback and we'd like to respond to that pretty much after 30 to 45 minutes or so of content, it can become quite difficult with all the distractions of the modern office place to pay attention, and the dialogue can continue on and on. So we'll look at using that model and approach for the technical assistance offerings that we've got coming up in the next year. And then specifically for the in-person events that we're looking at in March and April, they'll again be modeled. They'll be modeled off of like how the adult side was prepared. Speaking specifically about different agency nuance and different provider type needs, and then going a little bit deeper than what we can do in 20 to 30 minutes on a webinar. And also really, I think the other goal of those is to give providers a little bit better of a chance than what you can do in a chat box in a moderated 30-minute QA, to have some discussion and ideas share about what folks need, both in terms of technical assistance and the areas of question or uncertainty around the transition. So with that, I'm just going to take a quick look back at the question lists that have come through, as hopefully our state partners have been keeping an eye on this as well. So a group of children who were listed as excluded from Medicaid managed care in the presentation were children who have become Medicaid eligible through spend down. So will this group still be able to access Medicaid, and how will they access coordinated care?
Right. Yes, for those who become eligible for Medicaid, they will, and those that are excluded from managed care, the services will be available on a fee-for-service basis. Dan, if I could go back, this is Angela Keller from OMH, to one question that was asked. Will everyone be able to see the list of designated providers that are given to managed care? Similar to what was done on the adult side, these will be posted publicly, and certainly everyone will be aware of who is designated to provide HCBS and SPA services, so you will know if once that designation is complete that those providers' names will be given to the relevant plans.
Great, thanks for catching that one. A couple of other questions came in around foster care use. So a question asking to clarify or confirm the documentation that foster care providers can request from clinics.
So Dan, this is Mimi. We can't see the question. Is that, I'm not sure what documentation they might be asking for. Is there more detail within the question?
Yeah.
As a rule of thumb?
The question asker, which is my new favorite noun, just asked about specifically full treatment plans and case notes.
So as a rule of thumb, OCFS has always taken the position that for children in foster care that are receiving services outside of the foster care agency, in other words, receiving services in the community by a Medicaid provider or any other provider, that they should have full access to that information. Voluntary foster care agencies are, in essence, agents of the local Department of Social Services who have legal responsibility, just as a parent would have responsibility for a child. So they should have full access to that information.
Great. And will kids who were on Medicaid managed care before entering the juvenile justice system be automatically returned to it after leaving juvenile justice?
So this is Mimi from OCFS. Just to clarify, the population of youth who will not be enrolled into Medicaid managed care is a relatively small population of youth that are placed in OCFS-operated facilities only. So there are juvenile delinquents that OCFS often places with voluntary foster care agencies. Those youth will be going into Medicaid managed care. We always try to work with local departments of social services when children enter and leave OCFS-operated facilities. So continuity of care would be important, and so we would hope that that would continue for that relatively small group of kids who enter OCFS-operated facilities and will be excluded from Medicaid managed care.
A question came in that I think reflects that there are a few folks on the line and who are involved in the KIDS system who might not have contracted with managed care in the past. And so the question is, would a current MCO contract be available for viewing? I believe on the adult side that there's a lot of back and forth on a model or template contract, but what I can say is that it's specific to New York State, and it was prepared by one of our partners and colleagues, Adam Falcone, as part of a contracting webinar series and workshop series that we did over the summer. And so if folks are interested in just seeing what like a template managed care contract looks like, that tool is available on the MCTAC website under Tools and Resources. And there's an activity that goes along with it to help to familiarize providers who aren't experienced with contracting with MCOs with that process. So we'd strongly suggest we'll be doing robust contracting training and TA around contracting for KIDS providers as we get a little bit closer into implementation. But if you're interested in getting started now, we strongly suggest to look back at some of what's been presented already, as a lot of it's applicable both for kids and adults. Obviously, as you've heard today on the webinar from the presentations and Q&A, there's a lot of differences and distinctions between the two systems, but the general approach and language and look and feel of what that contract would be can be generally found to be the same. So we'd like to point people in that direction. So we're closing in on 1:30, and so we'll take just one or two last quick questions. Have rates for HCBS services been set yet, and will they be the same as the B2H WSP rates?
The HCBS rates are in the process of being developed. Certainly the foundation of what those rates look like is based on the 1915 Cs. But again, this is an alignment of 5 sets of HCBS services, of 3 state agencies' rates. And so there will probably be some identical rates, and some will be different based on what your current experience might be. More to come on that probably later this year.
Very good. One last question, and we'll close it out here. And if we didn't get to your question, we'll capture all of these and move them over for the Q&A and presentation for part 2 of this series, which is on February 11th. I encourage you to register for that now if you haven't already. But we'll close things out with any idea or guidance on what the role of local SPOAs will be in this transition.
So this is Donna from OMH. So we're still actively discussing the role of SPOA together with the Conference of Local Mental Hygiene Directors and with SPOAs themselves. Speaking for OMH, we're very interested in preserving an active role for SPOAs, but the exact nature of that, will be discussed at a later date. But rest assured, the expertise, the knowledge base that those individuals have will absolutely play a role in the future environment. We just got to be clear on exactly how that fits into the larger system.
Great, thanks so much for that. And thanks to all of our panelists for chiming in during the Q&A, to Donna for giving a great presentation, to my colleagues Yvette and Andy who are with us today. And so thanks again, and for everyone for joining. We're still 550 strong, which is really great for the end of a Q&A period. And as that number starts to diminish pretty rapidly as we're coming to a close, we'll just encourage everyone again to register for parts 2 and 3. If you have questions that we didn't have a chance to get to today, or additional questions once you go back to your desk or talk to some of your colleagues about the information shared, please feel free to send those over to mictac.info@nyu.edu. The contact information is available on the MICTAC website, and we'll be sure to fold those into the subsequent 2 presentations and help to inform some of the in-person information sessions that we've got coming in March and April. So thanks again to our presenters, and we'll look forward to speaking with everyone again in 2 weeks from tomorrow on the 11th.
Thanks, Dan.